Cruel divorce. After receiving the divorce certificate, I told Leo that I was pregnant. He sneered indifferently, "Then can you please abort it? Remember to send it to me for confirmation after the abortion." He thought this was my excuse to keep him, but the next day, I sent him the phone box with minced meat as he wished. When he was wailing in pain, I blocked him and left the country. Later, when I was holding my daughter's hand on the way back to China, I ran into him at the airport. His eyes were red, and he looked at me and my daughter with a look of lost and found. "I knew you wouldn't be so cruel to abort it. That's the child we have been looking forward to for a long time. Come, baby, I'm your father." Before I had time to deny it, the man next to me couldn't help but hold my hand and said unhappily, "Why are you yelling at my wife and daughter?" On the first anniversary of our marriage, Leo sent me the address of the box. I happily put on a beautiful dress and went to our wedding anniversary. When we arrived at the meeting place, we heard Leo chatting with his friends. "Isn't today your wedding anniversary with your sister-in-law? How dare you leave your sister-in-law to attend Ivy's welcome party?" Leo shook the red wine in the glass and smiled nonchalantly. "Why not? I even called her here. How can a wedding anniversary be more important than Ivy?" Leo's other brothers followed suit and screamed in strange voices. "Oh, it's our brother Sue who has a good way of training his wife. I thought you didn't care about Ivy anymore after you had a wife." Leo glanced at him and slowly swallowed the red wine in his mouth. "I married her on impulse. How can she compare with Ivy? You didn't pursue her on impulse. Don't be drunk now." Leo looked at the man in the middle of the seat coldly, his voice indifferent. "It was just a show. Who knew she would fall in love with me and insist on marrying me? Ha ha ha, that's right. It's just that brother Sue is a good man. As soon as the girl proposed to him, he agreed to marry her." My footsteps stayed where I was, unable to move for a long time. That night, I didn't enter the box as promised, but chose to go home. But when I got home, my silent phone reminded me all the time. I should get a divorce. Leo didn't go home all night. As for where he went, I still learned from the hot search on Weibo. Breaking news. Young pianist Ivy stayed in a hotel with a strange man, and had a passionate night. I clicked on the entry and saw that there were hundreds of words of breaking news written in it. A blurry photo of a man and a woman hugging each other was also attached. In the photo, a handsome man holds a slender and beautiful woman possessively in his arms. They ignore the paparazzi's camera and hug each other face to face. They smile intimately and unrestrainedly. I clicked on the comment area and saw a stream of blessings praising the man's talent and the woman's beauty. I thought I would be calm, but my vision was blurred inadvertently. I was stunned for a long time until my phone vibrated and the screen lit up with a string of numbers that I remembered by heart. It was Leo's phone number. I answered the phone with a subtle thought. I wanted to ask him if the hot search on Weibo was true. But the word Leo had not yet come out. Ivy's soft and innocent voice came from the other end of the phone. "Jocelyn, don't believe the gossip written by paparazzi. I was drunk last night, and Leo just took care of me in the hotel all night. We didn't sleep in the same bed all night. You are so generous, I believe you won't mind." Before she finished speaking, Leo's casual voice interrupted. "What is there to explain? You are wasting your time." Ivy seemed to have forgotten that there was a person on the phone, and couldn't help but quarrel with him. "I am a girl, I know girls best. What if Jocelyn gets jealous? Although we stayed in the same room innocently all night last night, as your good friend, I have to explain to her for you. TSK, you women are troublesome." "Leo, who are you talking about troublesome? Try to say it to me again." I listened to them quarreling like a young couple on the other end of the phone with a blank face. The anger in my heart could not be swallowed, nor could it be spit out. I endured, and finally couldn't hold it anymore. I vomited it out. I didn't eat breakfast, and I just vomited some colorless acid. Thanks to this vomiting, the young couple on the other end of the phone finally remembered me. Leo stopped flirting with Ivy. His anxious voice came along with the sound of electricity. "Wife, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" I couldn't help but feel sick when I listened to his voice and vomited again. Leo's voice became more anxious. "Wife, are you sick? Wait, I'll go home and take you to the hospital." I covered my mouth and was about to say no, but I felt acid in my stomach and couldn't help vomiting again. When I took out a tissue to wipe my mouth, the phone had been hung up. Anyway, I had decided to divorce, so I shouldn't get too involved. I sent him a message saying no. This time, he replied quickly. "I'll be home in 20 minutes. I stared at the words on the screen and was silent for a long time. How did Leo flirt with a woman in the previous second, and then rush to care about his original wife in the next second? I couldn't figure it out. I leaned back and squatted against the wall, but my mind was full of memories of Leo and me. For years ago, I ran into Leo in a car accident on my way to work. Seeing his car was about to catch fire, I risked my life to drag him out of the car and sent him to the hospital. After waking up, Leo was moved by my life-saving grace and gave me money again and again. I refused his reward, saving him was just my momentary kindness. But after my repeated rejections, he became interested in me. He began to pursue me. He sent me flowers, picked me up and dropped me off at get-off work, ordered desserts to bribe my colleagues in my company, etc. Whenever I rejected his kindness, he persuaded me with the reason that I could not repay his life-saving grace. And in the face of my rejection, he always spoke softly. In this way, I slowly fell into it. Not long after, we started dating. After dating Leo, he was always gentle and considerate in front of me. This made me fall deeper and deeper, and I was also sure that he loved me as much as I loved him. So after 3 years of dating, I took the initiative to propose to Leo. He thought for a moment and agreed to me, but after marriage, I learned that he had a white moonlight named Ivy in his heart since he was a child. The reason why he had a car accident was that Ivy rejected him. He was depressed and drove fast to relax. This past between him and Ivy was told to me privately by Ivy, who rushed back from abroad on the night of the wedding. At that time, I looked at Ivy with some amusement and told her in a boastful tone that my new husband once liked her. Yes, I think it's funny. Because I don't believe her words. After all, Leo has been so good to me in these 3 years. When I am sick, he is always the most anxious one. When I am sad, he is always the first to comfort me. When I was confused about my future, he also carefully enlightened me. He made me firmly choose my dream and slowly develop in it. So, I am sure that Leo loves me. But 1 year after marriage, I found that while he cared about me, he also cared about Ivy endlessly. At first, I thought it was Ivy who was making trouble. Later, I found that the reason was that he couldn't help but go astray. He enjoyed my admiration. He was also reluctant to give up the throbbing of youth. I love him, so I am more patient with him, always thinking that he will change. But he left me on the wedding anniversary to celebrate Ivy's return to China, talked about me with contempt when talking about me with friends, and stayed alone in the hotel with Ivy all night. If I still love him like this, then I am really cheap. Leo arrived home early. When he saw me, I was sitting on the sofa. He went back to the room to pick up the ID card and was about to pull me out. Let's go to the hospital. I shook my hand and didn't break free. I'm fine, no need to go to the hospital. I said softly, by the way, I have something to tell you, we're getting divorced. Before I said the word marriage, my eyes fell on the lipstick print on his shirt collar. Even though, I know it's hard for a man and a woman to be alone in the same room without anything happening. But seeing the glaring red mark, I still wanted to vomit like a conditioned reflex. In fact, I really vomited. Leo got even more anxious when he saw it, and he dragged me out and drove all the way to the hospital. After sitting in the consultation room, I couldn't even say divorce. I was distracted by the doctor's series of questions. Are you married or not? Are you preparing for pregnancy recently? When was your last menstrual period? After answering a series of questions, the doctor gave me a checkup list and said, you are probably pregnant, I'll give you a list, go check estradiol, progesterone and HCG. I walked out of the clinic in a daze. When I first got married, I also fantasized about having a baby. But the previous physical examination showed that I had uterine cysts and difficulty conceiving. Even after marriage, Leo and I never took any measures and never got pregnant. But the funny thing is that after I was about to divorce him, I showed signs of pregnancy. I held the list, and my mind was in a mess all the way. I had already decided to divorce Leo. What should I do if I really got pregnant? Should I really have an abortion? I returned to the waiting room, hesitating on how to tell Leo that I might be pregnant. But before I could think it through, Leo's seat was gone. His message popped up on the WeChat interface. Wife, Ivy said that there are so many paparazzi squatting to take pictures of her now, she can't go out, and she can't even have breakfast. You wait for me in the hospital, I'll go and give her breakfast and come back, love you. My eyes stayed on the word love you, and the hand holding the phone couldn't help shaking. That's good, I don't have to think about it. After all, he has made the decision for me. I replied expressionlessly, okay. The sun was hot outside, but the house was cold. I walked to the laboratory alone, my body was freezing cold. I came out of the hospital and went home immediately. I shook his hand away and laughed sarcastically. A longtime friend who can sleep alone in the same room. Leo's face froze for a moment, but he smiled proudly the next second. This wait lasted until 11 o'clock in the evening. With a click, the door opened. Leo looked at the bright living room, looked at me sitting on the sofa, smiled and wanted to hug me. I turned away. Leo thought I was angry, half knelt and held my hand, apologetically said, wife, I didn't mean to leave you. But there are too many reporters on Ivy's side, she can't go out, I have been friends with her for so many years, she came to me for help, I can't help but help her. I shook his hand away and laughed sarcastically. A longtime friend who can sleep alone in the same room. Leo's face froze for a moment, but he smiled proudly the next second. So my wife is jealous. I really have nothing to do with her. We didn't sleep together this time. When I was in the same room with her last night, I slept on the sofa, far away from her. Once, Leo also slept in the same bed with Ivy. At that time, there were other people besides the two of them. When I was angry with him, his friends all spoke for him. But under my insistence, Leo still promised me that this would not happen again in the future. But if we are not in the same bed, then is it okay to be in the same room? I moved my eyes to his collar, and the lipstick mark that symbolized the declaration of sovereignty was still there. Leo, it would be more convincing if you changed your clothes. I pointed to the lipstick mark on his collar. Okay, let's not talk about it anymore, let's get a divorce. I took out the divorce agreement from the sofa and handed it to him. We have been married for a year, and there is not much property during the marriage. We each have half, and you can give me cash. Leo frowned and took the divorce agreement, and said, Wife, are you kidding me? You didn't care so many times before, why this time? I couldn't help interrupting him anymore, and sneered, You also know that you cheated on Ivy so many times. Wife, I don't agree to divorce. I really didn't have sex with Ivy last night. I threw the agreement in my hand, stood up, and looked down on him. If you don't agree, then separate. I will sue when the time comes. During this period, I can't guarantee that Ivy will not be labeled as a mistress. I turned back to the second bedroom and locked the door. Leo slammed hard outside the door. Wife, open the door, let's talk. There's really nothing between Ivy and me. We are innocent. Wife, can you please stop making trouble? We were just drunk last night. The lipstick marks were probably left by her accidentally. We didn't make it to the end. I lay on my back on the mattress covered with small yellow flowers, and I felt much more relaxed. With Leo knocking on the door and shouting, I gradually fell asleep. 07 When I woke up in the morning, I contacted several paparazzi. I broke the news that Ivy had a night out with a married man. At first, I thought the news that Leo was married would not be released. After all, Leo is a famous young talent in City A, and he has enough money to suppress these romantic news. But unexpectedly, these news were put on the hot search as if helped by the wind. When Leo called me angrily, I was eating with the comments of netizens scolding them as scumbags and bitches. Jocelyn, I misjudged you. It's obviously between us. Why did you involve Ivy? She's a famous pianist. You'll ruin her by doing this. The rhythmic sound of Ivy crying woohoo was also heard next to me. I turned on the loudspeaker, and I was very calm. What did you misjudge me for? What did I do to make you so angry? You still have the nerve to say that. Didn't you spread the news that Ivy interfered in our marriage? I lowered my head and took a sip of soup, and said sarcastically, Did I let you stay in the hotel together? Did I book the room for you? Or did I force you to get married? After a long while, Leo's hoarse and helpless voice came. Wife, you really have to believe me. Nothing really happened between Ivy and me? I sneered, it almost happened to the last step. There was silence for a long time, and no one spoke. I suddenly felt very boring. I took a deep breath and cut the Gordian knot. Leo, either you and I go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a divorce tomorrow. Or I will continue to expose the scandals of you two dogs and couples. If your Ivy still wants to be a pianist with both virtue and art, then you should divorce me as soon as possible. I hung up the phone without waiting for their response. That night, under the harassing phone attacks from Leo, I turned off my phone and went to sleep. When I woke up, my phone was filled with 99 plus messages sent by Leo. But the latest one was at 5 in the morning. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 10 in the morning. You are not allowed to embarrass Ivy again, otherwise I will not let you go. Although this was the result of my request, my heart still couldn't help but hurt. Haha, this is the person who said he would love me forever. 08 at 10 o'clock, I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau on time. When I arrived, Leo was already there. He has always been clean, his shirt is wrinkled and his beard is untidy. He looked at me with complicated eyes, and his tone was as if he had suffered a great injustice. Why don't you believe me? I handed the information to the staff and said coldly, We have been in the same room for a night, how can I believe it? After signing, I handed the information to Leo. Stop talking nonsense, sign it. Leo held the pen tightly, looked at me deeply, pursed his lips and said coldly, Jocelyn, if I sign, there will be no turning back for us. With your conditions, how can you find a man better than me? Don't forget, you are still infertile. I looked at him and sneered, then you don't need to worry about it. Think about your Ivy. If you don't sign, the news that she interfered in other people's marriages can't be completely clarified. When I mentioned Ivy, Leo glared at me. I didn't retreat or give in, and looked straight at him. Leo was so angry that he sneered, Okay, very good, I want to see who will regret it in the end. Who else will want you except me? After that, he grabbed the pen and wrote his name in anger. After completing the formalities, I smiled at the freshly made divorce certificate and was about to go out. When I reached the door, Leo stopped me with a stiff face. It's hard to get a taxi here. Where are you going? I'll take you there? I shook my head, feeling disgusted. We're divorced, so don't get involved too much. I turned and left. Less than 10 meters away, my medical examination report popped up on the hospital's applet, which showed that I was pregnant. I guessed that the pregnancy was 9 out of 10. But after confirming it, I still felt very heavy. After all, on the night of the planned divorce, I had decided not to have it. But why should I bear the pain of killing a little life with my own hands alone? It was obviously him who betrayed our marriage. In the end, I was the one who was sad and hurt. I was not willing to accept it. I turned around and walked forward a few steps, calling Leo, who was about to get in the car. I'm pregnant. Leo was stunned at first, then smiled smugly. It's been less than 10 minutes, and you regret it? If you beg me, I'll deal with Ivy's affairs, and I might agree to remarry when I feel better. I shook my head, stared at him, and said without blinking, I won't lie about such things. Have you forgotten that you are infertile? Is it fun to threaten me with a lie to get back together? I sighed, feeling deeply frustrated. I'm really pregnant. Leo sneered indifferently. Oh, then can you please abort it? Remember to send it to me for confirmation after the abortion. The heart beat sluggishly. The continuous pain spread from the heart to the whole body. I have never regretted marrying him, knowing him, and saving him so much. I looked into his eyes steadily, and my voice couldn't help but become hoarse. Are you sure you want to send it to your place? Leo smiled, turned around and waved his hand, and said casually, do what you say. If you don't send it, I will look down on you. I immediately made an appointment for an abortion. The next day, after an operation, I lay weakly on the hospital bed. The man next to me looked at me with a foam box in his hand, and said hesitantly in a cold voice, after all, he is also your blood, so why don't you send it? I turned my head away, not daring to look at the foam box, but my tone was firm. Send it. He came out of my belly is the starting point, and the end point must be his father's responsibility. Why should I bear everything alone? I didn't want to be so decisive, but the breath in my heart made me unwilling. Love is a matter between two people. Why can the person who did the wrong have no burden? The man was silent for a long time, and finally bowed his head and said, I know. 5 years later, before I returned to China, I learned from my friends about Leo's reaction when he received the foam box. They said that Leo was unbelievable when he received it at first, thinking that I was playing a prank. But after seeing the surgical order attached to the box, he asked his secretary to go to the hospital to check the authenticity of the information with a trembling voice. When he learned that the surgical order was real, he, who had always been arrogant, knelt down and cried while holding the foam box. He began to look for me all over the world. He sent countless messages to my old mobile phone number and WeChat account, but I couldn't receive any of them. Because at that time, I had already gone abroad. But now, I came back with my lovely daughter and met him at the airport. At that time, I had just got off the plane and was walking through the crowd with my daughter Momo. Suddenly I heard someone calling my name. Jocelyn. The voice was so familiar that I thought it was an illusion, and my steps could not help but pause. After all, how could I be so unlucky to meet him just after returning to China? Mom, what's wrong with you? Momo's cute little baby voice woke me up. I touched her little head and smiled and said it was okay. It was just a delay for a while, and someone came in front of me. It was really unlucky. It was Leo. His hair was messy and he was panting, as if he was running from a distance. Jocelyn, I thought I was seeing things, but I finally found you. His eyes were red, and tears fell the moment he saw Momo. I knew you wouldn't be so cruel to abort it. That's the child we've been waiting for a long time. Come on, baby, I'm your dad. Seeing that he seemed to have misunderstood something, I took Momo back a step and stood in front of her defensively. Momo was still young and curiously poked her head out from behind me. She pulled the corner of my clothes and asked me in Momo's baby voice, Mom, who is this uncle? Why do you want me to call him dad? I obviously have a dad. When Leo first saw Momo's head poking out, his expression was so gentle that he almost dripped water. But when Momo finished speaking, his expression was a little distorted. He stepped forward in disbelief and gritted his teeth and said, I am your dad, and your mom loves me. Momo has always been spoiled by her father and is fearless. She stuck out her tongue at Leo and made a face. No, my mom loves my dad the most. After saying that, she suddenly looked excited and shouted to the front, Dad. I looked up and saw a familiar figure in front of me. Ryan strode towards us, his steps hurried, and his hair, which was always meticulous, was messy. After pushing away Leo, who was excitedly moving forward, he picked up Momo with one hand and held my hand with the other, saying in an unhappy voice, Don't you have a wife and children? What are you shouting about? After saying that, he raised his eyebrows again and smiled mischievously. What? I forgot, you really don't have one. Leo looked at Ryan in disbelief, and then at me. Ryan, it turns out that you have been preventing me from looking for her for so many years. I should have known that you had a crush on her a long time ago. You are a scumbag, don't you have a heart? You actually stole your brother's wife. Ryan raised his chin and smiled contemptuously. Too much nonsense, and she is my wife now. Then he said, who wants to be your brother? Ryan and Leo fought at the airport. Leo started the fight first, and Ryan fought back. When the airport security rushed over, Leo was knocked to the ground by Ryan's punch. He stumbled to his feet with the help of the security guard, and his mouth was bruised. When I ran towards Ryan with Momo, Leo's face was extremely pale and his voice trembled. Jocelyn, you were not like this before. Don't you love me the most? How can you be with someone else? When people are speechless, they really laugh. I touched Ryan's bruised cheek with heartache, turned my head and glared at Leo, and repeated what he had said to me. Oh, then can you please abort it? Remember to send it to me for confirmation after the abortion. As Leo's face became paler and paler, I said word by word, keep your word. If you don't send it, I will look down on you. Under the noise of the airport, our area was inadvertently separated into a small vacuum area. Leo was suppressed to be extremely silent, his lips moved, and his words were pale and weak. Jocelyn, I thought you were just talking in anger. He turned his eyes and saw Momo, and his voice was more courageous. Besides, the child has been born, let's start over, okay? Ryan held my hand tightly and looked down at me worriedly. I shook his hand back and shook my head at Leo, calmly. No, I gave the child to you as you wished. Don't deceive yourself. Momo is not even 3 years old. As his face became paler and paler, I continued, Leo, we ended a long time ago. Ryan and I were silent on the way back. It was late at night when we arrived at the house he had arranged. I was just coming out of the bathroom after he put Momo to sleep. Ryan walked in wearing a white shirt and black trousers. He pulled his loose tie slowly and methodically, his movements full of aggressiveness. When he walked in front of me, he had thrown the royal blue tie on the ground in disgust. He put his hands on my waist and pulled me into his arms, not caring at all that the water droplets on my body had stained his shirt into a large dark color. He lowered his head and looked at me deeply. I stood on tiptoes skillfully, stretched out my hands to wrap around his neck, and pressed my thin lips against his. Then I accepted his attack. Soothe his long-suppressed anxiety today. After a long time, when my legs were so sore that I could hardly stand, Ryan mercifully stopped. His lips rubbed against my cheek, and his voice was hoarse. Jocelyn, I was very scared today, you have to make it up to me. Our noses touched, and our breaths intertwined. I pushed him in embarrassment, and my voice was almost coquettish. Where did your previous coolness go? Ryan threw me on the bed, leaned over to kiss me, and smiled wildly. If you like it, I can pretend now. Ryan is Leo's friend. When we first met, it was Leo who introduced us to each other. At that time, he was sitting on the sofa. Although he was in a bar, he held a cup of tea in his hand. When Leo introduced me to him, he raised his head and drank the tea in the cup, saying casually, it won't last long, why hurt others? He was obviously talking to Leo, but his eyes were always on me. His eyes were dark under his silver-rimmed glasses. When I looked at him, the darkness in his eyes seemed to swallow me. I avoided his gaze and just felt that this man's words were really unpleasant. At first, Leo and I thought Ryan didn't like me. He looked down on my family background and felt that I was not from the same world as them. I secretly complained to Leo about him. He looks like a decent person, but why does he like to curse others so much? Leo comforted me at that time, he's just like that. He doesn't care about anyone. He's single. He's probably jealous that I have a beautiful girlfriend like you. If he doesn't like me, then I won't pay attention to him. So, I stayed away from Ryan. But Leo always likes to be lively and is keen on partying with friends, but Ryan is there at every party. After seeing him more, I gradually changed my opinion of him. Leo likes to drink and always gets drunk at every party with friends. Whenever this happens, Ryan, who never drinks, always helps me to help Leo get in the car. This behavior lasted for 3 years, and stopped on the night I successfully proposed to Leo. After I successfully proposed that night, Leo got drunk as usual. Ryan was particularly silent. Maybe he was in a good mood, and he also drank a little. But he was not drunk, and even helped me to help Leo get in the car. Thinking that he was also drunk, I said I would take him home. I thought he would refuse. But that night, he silently moved Leo to the back seat, got on the passenger seat silently, and fastened his seat belt. At that time, I proposed successfully, and I was extremely happy along the way, chattering a lot with him. I have forgotten what I said at that time, and I have also forgotten Ryan's mood at that time. I only know that when I parked the car at Ryan's house, he unbuckled his seat belt but did not get out of the car. Instead, it was when I chattered to him that I would drink some honey water when I got home. He suddenly asked me, "Can you not marry Leo?" I thought I heard it wrong at first, and turned my head and said in disbelief, "Huh?" Then Ryan leaned over and held my cheek and kissed me. This is a villa area, and the surroundings are quiet. The sound of lips and tongues touching is particularly clear. His kiss is possessive and fierce. I was stunned for a long time. When I reacted, Ryan had let me go and got out of the car. He stood outside the car, nodded at me, and his voice was as calm as always, drive slowly on the road, have a good trip. As if the kiss just now didn't exist. I was also shocked, lowered my head and said and drove away from the villa area in a hurry. I don't know if Ryan is drunk or really has strange thoughts about me, but I made up my mind to stay away from him. After all, he is Leo's brother, and it's okay to save face. I just hope that he is really drunk and forgets about this when he wakes up. I was distressed for a few days, but it was in vain. Ryan didn't attend the subsequent parties. Until the day when Leo and I got married, he didn't show up, but asked someone to send the gift money. The day before the wedding, I received the butterfly necklace he sent me. I pressed the necklace in the box, forgot about it, and married Leo. The next time I contacted him was the night I decided to divorce Leo. When I asked my friends to recommend a lawyer to me, he suddenly added me. Then he recommended the lawyer to me. Then he was with me on the day I aborted the baby. I was disheartened at that time. He offered me a helping hand, and I accepted it. I didn't consider how he felt about me, and I accepted his unclear help without any hesitation. Later, Ryan took me abroad. He encouraged me to continue studying, took me to exhibitions, and tried to make me cheerful. He was afraid that I would be sad, so he always accompanied me and helped me regardless of gains and losses. A year later, I had established myself abroad and became a disciple of a powerful oil painting master. One day, when I came back from outside, I saw him waiting downstairs. I suddenly called his name. He turned around, and his cold and noble face showed a slight smile when he saw me. That day, I took him home. When he was changing his shoes at the entrance, I suddenly asked him, "Ryan, what is our relationship?" He paused, looked up and looked at me seriously. "Look at you, whatever you say is what it is." So we established a relationship. After I got pregnant with Momo, he pestered me and I got married. After being exhausted, Ryan held me and washed me again. I looked down at the mark on my neck and called him a beast. Ryan held me in his arms contentedly and kissed my forehead. My phone rang again, and I reached for it. Ryan pressed my hand and said in a satisfied voice, "Still energetic? Do it again?" I was so scared that I closed my eyes repeatedly, fearing that he would be beastly and do it again. After all, he is always enthusiastic about this. After pretending to sleep for a while, I gradually fell asleep. So I didn't see that after I fell asleep, Ryan took my phone and deleted some messages. The next day, Ryan and I got up early to send Momo to kindergarten. The kindergarten had been selected long ago and was very close to where we live now. I originally planned to send Momo alone, but Ryan thought that Momo's first time to kindergarten was of great significance, so he came with me. After we waved goodbye and sent Momo to the kindergarten, he hurried to work. I turned around and went home, and then I met Leo on the road. He stretched out his hands to block my car. If I hadn't braked quickly, I would have hit it. I wiped the sweat from my forehead in horror and yelled angrily, "Leo, are you crazy?" Leo's mouth was still purple, and his beard was untidy. He didn't look as high-spirited as before. He knocked on my car window, looking haggard. "Jocelyn, can we talk?" I drove away angrily, but he was very close to the car. I glared at him. He begged, "I sent you a message and you didn't reply, so I had to come to you. Jocelyn, can we talk?" The car behind kept honking, and I had to nod. Leo and I went to a nearby coffee shop. Leo pushed the latte with milk to me in a flattering way. "Jocelyn, this is your favorite coffee." I didn't drink it, and said impatiently, "If you have anything to say, please tell me quickly. I have something to do later." Leo looked at me blankly, and his eyes suddenly turned red. "Jocelyn, you never spoke to me in this tone before." I wanted to laugh, and I really laughed out loud. "Leo, I thought I had made it clear enough at the airport. We are divorced. You have forgotten the reason for the divorce, but I haven't. I am really curious about how you can stand up in front of me. After marriage, he had an affair with Ivy and ended our marriage with his own hands. Now he comes to question me for not treating him as well as before. Funny." Leo's face turned pale, his head drooped more and more, and he said in a trembling voice, "Jocelyn, it was my fault before, but I have changed. I haven't contacted Ivy for a long time. I know I was wrong. Can you give me another chance?" I deeply felt that I shouldn't have stepped on the brakes just now. How could there be such a shameless person? I stood up and had nothing to say to him, but just as I turned to leave, he held me back. "Jocelyn, why are you so cruel? What does our relationship of so many years mean? I've been looking for you all these years. Don't you want to see our child? I buried him in a place where there are birds and flowers. Are you really so cruel that you don't even want to see him? Jocelyn, what do you want me to do to forgive me? Do you want me to die?" Before returning to China, I had imagined the scene of meeting Leo. In my fantasy, I would be very calm. In fact, I did it. But all this ended before he mentioned the aborted child. In this life, I have never let anyone down except him. After losing him, I always dreamed. I dreamed of him night after night, dreaming of a little baby whose face could not be seen lying alone in a foam box. I cried and told Ryan that I regretted it. Even if I didn't want him, I shouldn't have sent him to Leo. Ryan touched my head and took me to his grave. I learned that the foam box was not his. I felt a little relieved about the guilt for the child. If Leo had not cheated, he should have been born smoothly. Or if Leo cheated a year later, he should be in kindergarten like Momo. But there is no if. I am sorry for him, and Leo is even more sorry for him, so how can Leo have the face to mention him? I turned around with red eyes, picked up the coffee and smashed it on his head, saying word by word, Leo, you killed him, you have no right to mention him, I will not look back, even if you die in front of me. The coffee splashed all over Leo, and the blood slid down his forehead and stained his white shirt. The people in the cafe looked back at our table and whispered. I took big steps and left the cafe in the crowd. Behind me, I vaguely heard Leo's uncontrollable crying. The guest next to me exclaimed, oh my God, there is so much blood, should we call an ambulance? That handsome guy knelt down and cried, so miserable. He cried so sadly, what mistake did he make after all, that beautiful woman was so cruel. I didn't look back and walked out of the cafe. When I got in the car, tears dripped on the screen of my mobile phone. I was so sad that I couldn't help but call Ryan. Ryan, I miss you. Ryan heard my crying and asked anxiously, what's wrong? I covered my mouth and my voice was hoarse. Nothing. Then I couldn't say anything. He didn't say anything either. He quietly handled his official business and silently comforted me on the other end. After a long time, when I recovered, I said, sorry to disturb your work, hang up first, I will wait for you at home. Ryan seemed to have been waiting for me to speak, and a gentle voice came from the receiver, okay, I will go back early tonight. By the way, have you decided on the location of your art exhibition? Go and have a look tomorrow if you have nothing to do. I smiled and said okay. Ryan went to pick up Momo in the evening. Momo changed her shoes and rushed into my arms, holding a small cake in her hand. Mom, I missed you so much today. This is the small cake I bought for you on the way back. I kissed her little face, and my sadness dissipated a lot. Mom misses you too, thank you for the small cake you bought for me, baby. Momo kissed me again, you're welcome, is Mom happy now? Dad said you were in a bad mood today and needed some sweets to comfort you. I was stunned and looked up at Ryan. He frowned and complained to Momo, didn't you agree not to tell Mom? After Momo made a face at him, she buried her head in my arms and said in a muffled voice, but there is no secret between me and Mom. By the way, Mom, you haven't answered whether I am happy now. I laughed even more happily and touched her pigtails. I'm much happier, thank you Momo. Momo leaned on my arms and acted like a spoiled child. Then Momo, can you sleep with Mom today? Ryan was the first to refuse, no. Why, you have been occupying Mom for so many days. I listened to Ryan arguing seriously with Momo, and smiled sincerely. If happiness can be concrete, then this moment is my happiness. The next day, I went to the site of the art exhibition. I had chosen that exhibition hall when I was abroad. I was very satisfied after seeing it. As I walked, I imagined in my mind which painting should be placed in this place. Should I put some decorations in another place where I couldn't put paintings? I was immersed in thinking. So when Ivy came to me, I noticed her. After not seeing her for a few years, Ivy has become much more mature and haggard. She used to be pure and lovely, and loved to wear white dresses, but now she changed into an old-fashioned, outdated suit and put on bright lipstick. She looked at me with jealousy and said viciously, so you are the buyer of my exhibition hall? You and Leo have divorced, where did you get the money to buy the exhibition hall? Don't you do some shady business? I feel incredible about my recent luck. I just beat up a bitch yesterday, and another one came today. I sneered and slapped her in the face. I used all my strength and slapped her to the ground. I looked down at her condescendingly. Don't think that others are like you just because you do this kind of business yourself. Scumbags and bitches appeared one after another, consuming my patience. When I still had a lot of things to say to her, I saw her pale face. She covered her face, not as arrogant as before, and her voice was particularly sharp. I didn't do such a thing. I didn't have the hobby to study whether she did it or not. I just felt very unlucky, and felt that I had to find a new exhibition hall. I strode out and called my assistant to discuss the delay of the exhibition. The assistant said cautiously, Teacher Zhou, is there anything inappropriate? Why do you want to change it suddenly? I frowned and sighed. I just finished looking at the venue and met the owner of the exhibition hall. Before I finished speaking, the assistant took over the conversation. Teacher Zhou, I'm sorry, this is indeed my fault. I didn't do a good background check at the beginning and chose this address. It's all my fault, all my fault. I temporarily commissioned her to find the exhibition hall when I was abroad. This is not her fault. After all, she didn't know about Ivy and I. It's okay, it's not your fault, just find someone else, thank you for your help. The assistant on the other side seemed to be relieved and kept saying, Thank you, Mr. Zhou. It's really my fault for not knowing about the owner of this exhibition hall. At the beginning, I saw that the price was low and the location was suitable, so I sent you a list of candidates. After you chose, I was still worried about how to tell you about this. The owner of this exhibition hall was originally a pianist with a good family background and a little fame. Later, his family fell into poverty and he became the lover of a rich man. He was also beaten by his original wife for interfering in other people's families. He was on the hot search every now and then. He was a well-known little. I was stunned in the place, without a ripple in my heart, and even felt funny. So after Leo betrayed me, he didn't get together with Ivy. What did he want at the beginning? I thought about it, and finally I could only use the word cheap to describe him. At night, after I took Momo back, I received a message from Ryan. He said he would be back late tonight, so I didn't need to wait for him and went to bed early. That night, when my aunt took Momo to take a bath, I turned on the TV and browsed Weibo out of boredom. According to reports, senior executives of Xingxing Group are suspected of corruption and bribery. The police have begun to intervene in the investigation. The head of the Leo family, who is in charge of the group, has been summoned for bribery, involvement in gangs, etc. I looked at it carefully, thought about it, and didn't click in. I quit and played Candy Crush. What happened between me and Leo is over. All his good and bad news no longer has anything to do with me. Mom, I'm done, can you come and tell me a story? Momo's baby voice came, and I put down the phone and answered. Okay, I'll come. At night, I was woken up by Ryan while half asleep and half awake. He held me in his arms and kissed my forehead. I nudged his chest and said coquettishly, "Why did you come back just now?" Ryan gently touched my hair and apologized in a low voice, "Sorry, I woke you up." I stopped talking and held his waist tighter. When I fell asleep again, I vaguely heard, Leo's house collapsed, Leo jumped off the building and died. I turned over and slept more deeply. 3 months later, I opened my art exhibition as I wished. Ryan held Momo's hand and held flowers to celebrate for me. Among the visitors coming and going, Ryan handed me the flowers and smiled proudly. It seems that many people like Mr. Zhou's paintings. Congratulations in advance on the success of your exhibition. I touched Momo's head, smiled and accepted the flowers, and winked at Ryan. Thank you, President Ryan.